With the upcoming D&D movie, a lot of new players are going to be coming, so I wanted to talk about making D&D cost effective, especially when you are starting. So to start, the cheapest edition of D&D right now is 5th. This might change in the future. You might compare the Player's Handbook of 2nd edition to the Player's Handbook of 5th edition and be confused by that statement for a moment, but let me show you something magic. This is the system's reference document. It is a full reaccounting of almost all the rules in the game, with a large number of monsters and magic items included. It is fairly stripped down, so you won't get a lot of flavor, text, art, and some of the subclasses. And the subclasses are probably the biggest loss because you don't really need deep in the fiery recesses of heat. An item is stored and it begins to rise as if given life on its own before hardening into a strange substance to describe baking bread. As for the subclasses, that's what most expansions are built on, so it functionally makes the player's handbook another expansion. So all you need to act as a player is this, some hard reading, basic arithmetic, and to find someone who will act as your dungeon master, though you won't have all the fancy races and subclasses some of the YouTubers you're binging as a new player are referencing. But then comes the neat question. What if I want to be a dungeon master? Well, now you do have to shell out some cash, and it'll take a moment to break down everything involved. So unless you're a wizard at game design, you're going to need help balancing fights. So you need right now either a dungeon master's guide or a module. So modules are basically pre-built adventures and are a pretty neat way to get started. Some monsters that are referenced might not be in the system reference document, but Google has you covered. You might even skip official material and start with a third-party module, but I'll recommend the module included with any D&D starter set, running you, I think, around 20 bucks. Then you might ask yourself, what about the other thing you mentioned, the Master Dungeon Guide? Yes, so this one includes direct guidance for making monsters on your own, balancing encounters, and detailed explanations of how the game runs in theory and ideally in execution. I think every DM should read it through cover to cover at least once. Editing note, this refers specifically to if you're making your own adventure. But if Reddit is anything to go by, it isn't. You hooligans have been skipping it entirely, and that'll run you 30 bucks right now. And I suppose you're probably asking the big question right about now, what about dice, minis, and mapping? Those cost a lot, right? You aren't required to buy dice. Virtual rollers are widely available online and in your app store of choice. Miniatures get real costly real quick if you are buying anything of value. I'd suggest Wargames Atlantic, but really I'd suggest not getting proper minis. As for mapping, let me show you what I do. This setup cost me around $30, but I already own a home printer. This is a large cork board I purchased at Hobby Lobby for around $20, and those tacks are being used for the character positions. I paid extra for some wooden ones. I use these to represent monsters, and map pins hold the pages in place. You might notice this is a world map instead of a dungeon. This is just because I run a world map campaign format. If you go online, you'll likely find many other cheap mapping methods. I'd recommend doing plenty of research. They can get really interesting, as well as Roll20, which you've likely already heard about if you're considering playing online. If you set up tablets, it runs fairly well in person. I would not recommend it if you're using computers. And if you'd like something a little less information-based, right here is a fun story.